to everyone joined today, and thanks for tuning in. I am Isabella, Master's in Movement Science at UNES Brazil and the virtual intern of the Exercise Physiology and Cardiovascular Health Laboratory at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute. I'll be your host for today's episode of BEaTS Research Radio, a YouTube channel and podcast which aims to disseminate science to the community. Our guest today is Dr. Pedro Curi Hallal. Dr. Pedro Hallal earned his bachelor's in physical education with the Federal University of Pelotas, where subsequently he received his master's and doctoral degree in epidemiology. As a part of his postdoctoral, he completed an internship with the Institute of Child Health at the University of London. Dr. Pedro was the Dean of the Federal University of Pelotas, where currently he is a professor of physical education in the undergraduate and graduate programs. He is one of the founders and ex-chair of the Brazilian Society of Physical Activity and a member associated with the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. At the present, he is involved with COVID-19 and epidemiology in Brazil, Global Observatory for Physical Activity, and being the chief editor of the Journal of Physical Activity and Health. Welcome, Dr. Pedro.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here talking to you guys.
Thank you. So our first question today. Physical inactivity is a pandemic responsible for 5 million deaths per year worldwide, mainly in developing countries. As a member of the Brazilian Society of Physical Activity and the Global Observatory for Physical Activity, could you tell us which are the main differences between higher and low-income countries when you talk about physical activity?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we need to say is that physical inactivity kills 5 million people per year worldwide. And that justifies the use of the word pandemic. It is many people are inactive, the health consequences are devastating, it is out of control, and it does not respect geographical borders. So this is the very definition of a pandemic. When we published that in 2012 in the Lancet, we could never imagine that the word pandemic would be used so widely as it is right now because of COVID-19. But, you know, physical inactivity fills every single criterion for the justification of the word the use of the word pandemic. When we look at physical activity, when we look at physical activity data in high versus low and middle income countries, the main difference is the domain in which physical activity is practiced. When we look at data from high income countries, pretty much most physical activity is practiced in leisure time, which means people choosing to do physical activity as part of their lives. When we look at low and middle income countries, and particularly in low income populations within these countries, the situation is quite different. Many people have high levels of occupational physical activity, which is not a choice, it's just what they do for a living. And many people do transport-related physical activity. Again, it's not a choice, it's the only way they can commute to work. So I think this is the main difference between low and middle as compared to high income countries in terms of physical activity.
No, thank you for clarifying this information for us, Professor. So when two pandemics meet, as the principal investigator of the COVID-19, the largest epidemiological study of COVID-19 in Brazil, and being one of national and international leader in physical activity and epidemiology. In the face of this scenario, what actions can be made to improve the participation in physical activity?
Yeah, there are several interventions out there that are proven to work to increase population levels of physical activity. And I think the main thing I should say here is that these interventions are not to be targeted to individuals only. So it's not only about convincing people to exercise or something like to tell people how they should live their lives. It's much more structural changes and environmental change that will promote activity-friendly environments. So just an example, building cycle paths, building or closure of streets in the weekends, or public gyms in low-income communities. So this type of intervention that targets the population as a whole instead of each individual at a time is more effective at promoting physical activity. And I like this thing about the collision of the two pandemics. So, you know, COVID-19 killed like almost 5 million people in a year and a half. Physical inactivity kills 5 million people every year. So both are important and both are connected. So there are studies now showing that inactive people are much more likely to have a severe COVID infection and even to die. So if you promote physical activity, one benefit you get is that you have a population that is more prone to infectious diseases as well, such as coronavirus, or at least the severity of infectious disease will be milder. So it's one more reason to promote physical activity widely.
Yeah, thank you. Two sides of the same coin. On one hand, Brazil is one of the most countries produce research about physical activity in the world. On the other hand, recently you published an article in the important Lancet entitled SOS Brazil, Science Under Attack. Not only in Brazil, since scientists face several challenges globally. Do you have any advice for scientists who are just starting their careers?
So I think the main thing I should say to young scientists is that science is all about work. So when you look at science from the outside, sometimes you think, oh no, look, these genius guys who can publish lots of papers in important scientific journals. That's not the case. You know, the one thing I learned in this time is that those publishing the best papers are the ones that work the hardest. So first thing, work hard. The second thing is more like specific to Brazilian researchers. You know, I know it's tempting to go away from Brazil. Science is under attack. The country science budget is going down, but we need you guys here. So at some point, consider staying in Brazil to help us build a better country. I'm recording this video from California in a short-term Fulbright funded fellowship, but my long-term position is in Brazil, and I think it will continue to be there. So we Brazilians need you fellow researchers to stay in Brazil, because otherwise it will be very difficult to rebuild this country.
Yes, thank you, Professor. So, Score for Brazil, congratulations for being the first editor-in-chief based outside the United States in the history of the Journal of Physical Activity and Health. Unfortunately, women are still significantly underrepresented in sports science, such as in leading authorship, editorial board positions, or participating in clinical trials. With all your background, what do you consider as current and future advancements in the journey to equity for women in exercise science?
You know, in my field of research in public health, we typically use the triple inequality concept by Braille and colleagues. And it's gender, it's race, and it is socioeconomic position. So all these three concepts generate inequalities. And focusing on the gender inequality issue, you know, we need policies to make the competition between men and women more fair. So for example, sometimes women go deliver babies, and this needs to be considered when evaluating the CV, for example. Some of these policies are starting to take place in Brazil and other countries, and I hope they will continue to happen. We cannot pretend there are no inequalities. They are out there and they are massive. So the first thing to make them happen is to recognize they exist. And sometimes I see some denialism about inequalities, people trying to pretend that inequalities do not exist. So I think the first thing we need to do is to recognize them. And the second one is to solve, or at least start solving the problem by incorporating minorities in every single position you can. Just one example, in the Journal of Physical Activity and Health now, the total number of editors is 8, 5 of them are women. So, you know, it is by actions more than by discourses that we change the history. And I think that's important lesson for the future.
Indeed, thank you so much. So this concludes our interview. I would like to thank you, Professor Pedro, for the fascinating talk with us regarding physical activity research. Thanks to our listening for checking out this episode of BEaTS Research Radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or find us in your podcast app. On behalf of the whole team here at the BEaTS Research Radio, stay safe and heart health.